Okay, so with that, I am excited to introduce tonight's speaker. As you guys have seen, if you can see the video, he's had his introduction slide on there, it's Ben Cooley. And I was gracious enough to get to meet Ben a few years ago as he actually judged a goat showmanship jackpot at our Wyoming State Fair. And so he also has expertise in other knowledge in other species, but tonight he's here to talk about pigs, and he definitely comes firsthand with lots of expertise in this area. Is that he works for Zoetis as far as his career goes, and then he also raises show pigs, and so he's had lots and lots of experience with pigs all the way from birthing all the way to the show ring. And so we're excited that he's agreed. He didn't volunteer, but he agreed to do this for us tonight and share his knowledge. And we do hope that you guys can walk away and have your questions answered. So please use that chat box to put your questions in, or unmute yourself to ask them as we go along. And then also at the very end, we'll definitely have a question and answer session at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben and allow him to add to his introduction whatever he wants to add with that, and then we'll go from there. So welcome, we're glad you guys are on, and if you have questions, please know this is supposed to be interactive, and hopefully you guys will learn a lot tonight. With that, Ben, I'm going to let you take it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dawn. Hopefully everybody can hear me fine. Can you hear me, Dawn? Good.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. You're good.
All right, perfect. As Dawn said, my name is Ben Cooley. I live in Sterling, Colorado. I work for Zoetis on the beef cattle side, actually, and Zoetis is the largest animal pharmaceutical company in the world. So have some years of experience there. Also, before that, I worked for Ranchway Feeds in the nutrition department as a salesman for 3 years. And prior to that, I was the livestock judging coach and animal science professor at NJC in Sterling as well. And then for the past decade or so, I've been a co-owner in Flatland Show Pigs with the Funk family right outside of Sterling, where we raise about, we're up to nearly 50 head of sows and put on an annual show pig sale here this spring coming up on April 7th. So as Dawn said, a little bit of experience in a lot of different areas. So hopefully I can help you tonight. We can talk about a lot of things. Please, at any time, fire away in the chat box your questions to Dawn. She can relay them to me, and we're going to have a good time tonight. Hopefully learn something and go from there. With that said, we're going to get started here. If my PowerPoint will work. There we go. So as we get started tonight, we're going to talk about, these few main bullet points here of the quality of the animal, the facilities, the water, health program, feed program, and kind of touch on each of those. I know the main general discussion is the health of the animals, but I think it all encompasses back to these multiple facets to keep an animal and a show pig healthy the entire show season and keep them on feed so you guys have a successful project. So I want you to understand a couple things. The biggest determining factor of how good or how well your project will turn out, I think, is genetics. You have to start with an animal that has genetic potential to be special, so to speak. And we think about it this way. No matter how hard I would work out, I am never going to run a 100-meter race as fast as Usain Bolt. That is just a plain fact. If any of you guys have watched the Olympics and seen Usain Bolt run a 100-meter dash, the guy's incredible. He has a genetic potential that was far greater than mine at birth, and that's just the plain truth of it. Now, he had to capitalize on that genetic potential to be able to achieve those goals. Well, livestock are the same way. Show pigs are the same way. We're trying to breed elite genetics, put elite pieces together, and then once you guys buy your project, you guys have to try to maximize those genetics. So as I kind of like to say, 50% is genetics, 50% is the management of it that comes down to you. That's the nutrition, the health, the facilities that get the job done. But you have to start with a genetically and phenotypic superior animal to give yourself a successful chance. So understand there are many quality animals out there. You have to find one that fits your goals and fits your needs. With that said, adequate facilities, a good health program, balanced nutrition, those are all necessities for maximizing the genetic potential of every animal. just because you have a fantastic baby pig that you buy this spring doesn't guarantee you anything. I think one of the biggest mistakes young families in the show industry make is getting caught up in how much you spend on an animal. Understand this. You have to set a budget, set expectations, and keep obtainable goals in mind. I think that's one thing that different families get caught up in. Oh, I have to buy the most expensive animal, or the most expensive animal is the one that always wins. That's not true. I've seen that multiple times in my experience. That's not something that always happens. You have to set a budget as a family, set expectations as a family of what you want to achieve this year. And if it's winning your county fair, that's fantastic. But understand there are certain things that have to happen to reach those goals. And it just might be the daily goal of going out, spending time with your animal, feeding them, and keeping them healthy. If that's our number one goal, then let's make sure we have that success first. And then some of the other successes will come later on. Any questions relative to that?
None in the chat box. You're good.
None did. Okay, good. Let's start off by talking about your facilities. Now, guys, some of you probably have facilities that are already built that, you know, are really nice. Maybe some of you are just starting out. I think something to keep in mind when you're starting off with your facilities is disinfect those buildings, pens, equipment before the arrival of the new pigs. I know one mistake we always make is, you know, we get done with last year's fair and we throw all the stuff back in the show barn, maybe, so to speak, and then we forget about it. And then all of a sudden it's April 1st again. We're like, oh man, we better go get our pigs bought. Are we ready to, you know, get this project started? So a power sprayer with soap or disinfectant such as chlorhexidine, washing down those facilities, cleaning up everything before you ever start is, you know, several weeks ahead of time is probably a good idea. That will help prevent maybe some disease from ever starting. I will say this, cement is less susceptible to disease than wood or dirt. Now, I know not everyone is maybe to be able to have a concrete cemented floor in their building. Some of you guys are outside on, you know, in dirt, or, you know, maybe more exposed to the elements, but understand that whatever building you do have, let's try to disinfect it. Now, that comment I have at the bottom, new pigs should be separated from current pigs for 30 days. You know, if you think about that, that's a nice general rule of thumb in a big kind of confinement operation with biosecurity. That's not always possible in a show pig operation. I'm sure some of you guys maybe buy your pigs from one breeder or one location and bring them all together, and that's fine. Some of you may go out and purchase pigs from multiple breeders, multiple locations, and that's, you know, so your show string is comprised of multiple pigs from different locations. Understand, I know you're not able to keep them all separate from commingling, you know, for that amount of time. So we can talk about some things that maybe prevent disease from spreading. Understand though, if you bring hogs from multiple locations together, you're going to bring some different strains of diseases maybe together, and you're going to have to take a few more precautions. So we'll talk about that tonight. When we talk about the area that a pig needs, I always like to say they kind of need at least 8 square feet per fully grown 260-pound market hog. You know, when we get our baby pigs, they're just little things, right? They're 50, 60, 70 pounds. So, you know, when you put them in a little pen to begin with, you're thinking, oh, that's going to be perfectly fine for the little Porky the pig. And then all of a sudden they keep growing and growing and growing. And by the end of the summer, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have outgrown my elements. I've outgrown my facilities here, and my pigs are way too big and we're in trouble. So understand, this animal is going to get big and big in a hurry. You're going to have them for 3 or 4 months here, and they're going to put on a lot of pounds. So I always kind of say 8 square feet per fully grown 260-pound market hog. We talk about maybe some of the best designs are maybe a long, narrow alleyway, such as an 8x24 pen. If it's completely enclosed from the elements, that would be really, really nice. However, that's not always possible. But if you could have at least maybe an 8x8 area for a building, maybe a 3-sided shed, and the rest of the area is in the open air, that's perfectly fine too. whatever facilities you do have, just understand you're going to need a little more space for those hogs as they get bigger. You may be able to start them off in a small little enclosed pen during the cold of winter here, but as they grow and get bigger, you may have to adjust. As I said, if possible, the floor of the building should be concrete, and we'd like to have some shavings laid over the top of that. You don't need to house those pigs on just straight concrete with no bedding. We need to keep some soft bedding there. Wood shavings work really well to keep the dust down in those shavings. I know we can use straw at times. If it's really cold, that insulates very well. So maybe here to start off with, you can put some straw down to keep them warm. I do like having shavings, though, on that concrete because they tend to stay the cleanest and they tend to keep their skin and hair just a little more presentable throughout the entire portion of the feeding period. If that shed is totally enclosed and it's not, environmentally controlled completely, maybe with air conditioning, you need to have some type of fans, maybe even a mister set up to keep those pigs cool. If you do want to set up a mister, that's fine. Understand, though, you don't need to make things wet. You need to keep things pretty dry, just from we don't want to attract flies. We don't want things to get messy. So you can use misters if you want to, but keeping things cool and dry throughout the entire summer is going to be pretty important. In the wintertime, which is obviously right now, is if you guys that lived through this storm this last week like we did in Sterling, it is still very much winter. And I know some of you are probably starting to get your pigs, or you will here within the next couple of weeks. Guys, we could have inclement weather all the way through May. Heck, some of us, even into early June. So it's pretty important that when we keep those pigs warm, keep them in dry bedding. If you need to have a heat lamp up to keep them, a little warm at night, that's not a bad thing either. Make sure we don't have those heat lamps exposed to, dry straw, though. Let's make sure we keep things safe. But guys, understand, pigs can't regulate their body heat very well. Little baby pigs really don't do a good job of that. So it's pretty important to keep them warm. Did we have a question there?
No, you're good.
Good. Okay. If you guys have an outside area where they can get outside, it should be dirt gently sloping from the shed to the end of the pen, kind of for some drainage. If you have an outside area where those pigs are, understand they can get sunburned. Most of these pigs that are raised now for show pigs like ours, they're in total confinement inside. They have not seen the sun directly in their lifetime. When you bring them home and you think, oh, we'll let them outside and they'll have get to, lay out in the sun a little bit, they will sunburn, especially the ones that are fair skinned, like the white pigs. They can sunburn immediately. And it doesn't take much at the high elevation that we're at here in, Wyoming, Colorado, in this area, Rocky Mountain region. So understand that. If you do put them outside, that's perfectly fine. You may need to put some sunblock on them. You need to get them accustomed to being outside. So just to understand that. Keeping them inside, out of the elements, especially when they're young, is probably a good idea if you can. The watering system. If you have kind of an outside area, it's not a bad idea to have that, maybe outside from a cleanliness standpoint, so your inside is not getting, dirty. However, I'm a big fan of just having an automatic water system hooked up to, directly to a water faucet, or to keep that water clean and cool. Understand this, that water is your number one nutrition. The number one requirement of nutrition is water. Yet we don't want to have a big mess. And I know sometimes we have to maybe hand water stuff. Understand those pigs will tip over that, dish, and can mess up your bedding and keep things pretty messy there. If at all possible, an automatic water system directly hooked up to a hydrant, keeping it cool, is a pretty good idea. Do we have any questions regarding that?
Nope, we're good still.
Okay. If this will advance here. There we go. All right. So for feeders, obviously when you get your pigs home for the first time, if you want to have them on an automatic feeder where you just, put in a sack of feed and you kind of let them eat free choice, I don't mind that right off the bat as you get those pigs to begin with and, get them going. However, as those pigs reach 125 pounds or so, we need to really start monitoring their intake and their gain. And that's where, daily weighing comes into effect. And why I talk about this, you're not going to know, and I know you're going to have some feeding clinics later on, but you're not going to know really how much your pig is gaining on how much feed unless you're hand feeding them. So when you're starting off, if you want to keep them on a self-feeder for a little while, that's fine. But understand the bigger, more aggressive pigs will try to eat more feed and keep the little ones out of it. So one of the biggest things I always see from customers is they say, man, we got those 2 pigs home from your sale and they were about the same size and one just took off and he's really gaining fast and the other one's not. Well, if you're feeding them together and not regulating their each individual intake, one may be eating a little more than the other one. So kind of understand, how you're going to feed those and what your goal is there. Make sure we have those feeders are clean though. Every time you put feed inside or put feed in them, whether you're feeding them inside or outside, depending on that weather there. Kind of a little tidbit here. Understand, if you guys have raised show pigs before, you'll know this. Hogs usually go to the bathroom away from where they bed, feed, or drink. So they go to a certain corner and they kind of defecate right there. Keeping that clean every day is really, really important. So we want to have enough space for those animals so they're not on top of each other. And if you clean up after them, kind of spot clean every day, it will reduce flies and it will reduce the chance for disease. So a couple important things there that I think management can help save you some heartache in the long run. All right, when it comes to water, we said clean, fresh water all the time is very important. We said an automatic water system in every pen is really what we're needed. They need to be able to reach water at all times, whether they're inside or outside. Remember, water is that most important nutrient. Any questions so far? Dawn, did we have anything?
I have a question.
Yes.
So last year, my pigs had some skin problem where they had really flaky skin.
Yep.
We tried conditioner. We put sunscreen on them every day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how to get rid of that.
Okay, good question. That can happen from time to time. So one of the challenges that I think we run into is, oh man, we want to keep our pigs clean and we tend to want to wash them every day with maybe soap or something. That will dry out an animal's skin really rapidly. And if you notice, we live in a really dry climate. So when it comes to daily hair and skin for these pigs, one of my recommendations is this. If you're going to wash with soap, we only need to do it maybe once a week. That's it. And go ahead.
So what I do is when we walk them, when they're really hot and exhausted, we get some cold water and we spray them down. Mm-hmm. Does that affect their skin?
It can, maybe a little bit. I don't mind rinsing them every day, but in this dry climate, you are going to have to put on some a conditioner on them to keep their skin hydrated. And there's different kinds out there. And, I'm sure, I think when Dawn, you're going to have somebody talk about, what's in the show box or some of that daily care a little later on. That's not something you necessarily have to worry about right now. But to keep that skin from being really dry, moisturizing every day, keeping them out of the sun will help as well, because that will dry out their skin. So
we have an enclosure and they can, go out whenever they want.
Okay.
We use Revive conditioner.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's not a bad product. It can get a little expensive, but that's I think if they're exposed to the sunlight all the time or that can help dry them out. So you'll just have to kind of watch that.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. Good question. So let's talk about a health program and why it's very important.
Hey, Ben.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Sorry, there is a question in there if you want to, before you go, because it had to do with water.
Absolutely.
It says, if you don't have an automatic water, how much water will a pig drink a day?
That is a good question. When it's hot, I guarantee you they can drink 4, 5, 6 gallons a day per pig, a large pig that's growing, if not more. So depending on what type of environment they're in, if they're kind of in a hot environment, you're not in cool shade, they can down the water. So they drink more than you think. If you've ever watched a pig and you have those automatic waters, and you just watch them for a little while, notice how often they are hitting that water and going to it. It's fairly often. So it's pretty important. If you have to hand water and it's really warm, you need to maybe hand water several times a day. But automatic water would be the best option.
So Ben, can I just piggyback on that?
Sure.
So when we're talking about automatic water, can that be like a small barrel or PVC pipe, something with the pig nipple in it? Like, do you have a suggestion as far as?
Well, my suggestion would be
if they can't hook that to automatic water, like a continuous hose flow.
Continuous hose flow, yeah. Other options, if the PVC pipes that have the nipple waters on them or a barrel with the nipple waters, that's fine. But if they're exposed to the sunlight and outside, understand that water is going to heat up and get extremely hot, and those pigs may not want to drink it. Or in the wintertime, or if it's still cold, it could freeze. So there's a couple elements there. If you're going to have an automatic water, I would suggest it's going to be inside, out of the elements where it doesn't get direct sunlight, so it doesn't heat up, and they're more willing to drink it. Kind of keep it at least cool or room temperature. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. That health program. Look, healthy pigs are going to maximize gain, feed efficiency, conversion rate, and most importantly, produce a safe and healthy product for consumers. We want those pigs to stay healthy. Healthy pigs gain better, eat better, look better, show better. So it's pretty important to maintain that. Having a good relationship with a local vet is also important for a successful project. So if you do need advice, you can go to your local vet and talk to them about it. Now, this is not if there's any vets in the crowd, I'm not trying to disparage them, but local vets in this area that understand pigs are probably far and few between. There's not many of them. Not to say there aren't some really good ones. I have some good ones that I work with. But a lot of our vets around here are cattle vets. That's what they're primarily trained for, because we're not in a huge hog environment in the Rocky Mountain region. Understand this. I still think having a good relationship with that local veterinarian to understand, hey, I have 4-H pigs and I may need to get a prescription for an antibiotic from time to time, can help you in the long run. And if you have questions about what certain vets, be more than happy to answer them, but that's always good to have. Read and follow those labels on any medication you're administering, and understand if your feed, and we'll talk about that in a while, has an active drug in it. What is the drug and what is the withdrawal time? Those are some things to really understand. Okay. Before you ever buy your pigs, a producer should have already given at least these vaccinations for these diseases, and there could be even more on there, but erysipelas, PRRS, mycoplasma pneumonia, circovirus, influenza, those are all ones we vaccinate for, along with rhinitis. You should have this conversation with your breeder to say, okay, they've gotten all of their proper vaccinations? Because a properly vaccinated pig, it's going to be cheaper to prevent problems from ever happening than have to treat it. So they should be vaccinated before you ever pick them up, and ask them for what they've been vaccinated for. This is what we do. They've been vaccinated multiple times. We try to make sure these things are in good health before they ever leave the farm, at least at our place, because we don't want you to have a problem. Now, this is for all of my listeners out there. If you're getting pigs from multiple locations, multiple breeders, and bringing them all together, I highly recommend revaccinating your pigs once they're all at your place, specifically probably for mycoplasma, circo, and PRRS. And here's why. Once you bring all those pigs back together, revaccinating them and getting them on the same program, because you may or may not know exactly what all they've had, can help. Now, understanding some of these vaccinations are, a 50-dose vial that you have to mix at one time and use all together. That may not be conducive for your 5 pigs. So maybe it's as easy as Dawn, a club coming together and saying, guess what? We're going to try to revaccinate, a bunch of pigs in the club. We can all, buy one 50-dose vial and we can get them all vaccinated, within a couple hours here if they're close, or your neighbors. But the big thing is talk to the breeder you bought them from, make sure they're vaccinated. And then if you want to revaccinate, talk to your consulting veterinarian about that. Talk to the breeder about what you think you should give. But I think that can help prevent some problems from ever happening.
So, Ben?
Yes.
We bought our pigs and they were never vaccinated for anything.
Okay.
What do we do?
Well, a couple things. If you're never going to take your pigs out to show unless it's at the last fair at county fair time.
I'm showing my pigs at fair.
Okay, just at fair. All right, if you're doing that, you probably could get away with not having them vaccinated. However, my recommendation is to get them vaccinated for these diseases, because if they ever come in contact with these diseases, obviously they'll create an immune response to it, and it could be a severe where they could develop the disease. My recommendation would be to vaccinate your pigs once you have them.
We did dewormer ourselves last year. We got pigs that were vaccinated from a different breeder this year.
Okay.
But this is my second year. Do we bring them to a vet and they vaccinate them, or do we have to vaccinate them?
Bringing them to a vet and having the vet vaccinate them might be the easiest, because he or she would know exactly what to vaccinate them with and can get it done. So that might be a good idea, doing it that way.
Okay.
Good question.
I have a question.
Yes.
How soon after I buy my pigs should I worm them?
Good question. We're going to talk about worming here momentarily, but kind of my rule of thumb is at the beginning of every month we should probably worm those pigs. But talk to the breeder that you got them from. I mean, if he or she just wormed them, probably not going to be necessary right away. But I'm going to talk about it being kind of every 30 days we get those pigs wormed to keep them healthy. But good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Dawn, do we have any more questions out there?
Can you explain maybe a little bit more about worming? Like this is
Sure.
a general question that they didn't know what worming was.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to cover that here in a slide just momentarily. So I'll get to worming here in just a second if you guys
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Good. Understand this, when it comes to health of animals, stress is the biggest reason for disease, and that is one we usually can't control. So what are stressful times in an animal's life? Well, when you bring them home to a new environment, that can be a stressful time. When you take them to the show, that's a stressful time. Transporting them anywhere can be a stressful time. So people always talk about, oh, my pig was perfectly healthy at home, and then all of a sudden I took it to fair and it got sick. Well, you put it through a new stressful period. So clean and fresh water, clean food, calm handling can help prevent stress from happening. Working with those pigs at home so they're used to you working around them, showing them, maybe before you ever show them at fair, that's always a good idea as well. This is just a little tidbit at the bottom of the slide there. The average body temperature of a pig is anywhere from 101.6 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So a little hotter than a human, right? 98.6 would be a human being. Pigs actually run at a hotter internal temperature. And people get a little worried, if they get a thermometer and they check the temperature on them, they should be somewhere in that range. So kind of something for you to keep a track of there. Okay, now antibiotics. Guys, they are a necessity probably in our show pig world to help treat and prevent diseases. Now, understand, you cannot give or receive an antibiotic without a veterinary prescription. So you need to talk to your vet before you ever give an antibiotic. However, here are some of the main swine antibiotics that you've probably heard of out there, and I kind of put their withdrawal times next to them. Does everybody understand what the withdrawal time is? That would be the number of days after you administered that drug before that animal can be harvested safely, go into the food chain. So this gets, this may not be quite as important at the very beginning of your project when those animals are little babies, but as we get toward the end of your project and we're getting close to fair, we have to worry about withdrawal times to make sure we're not administering a drug or a vaccine for that matter. Vaccines have withdrawal times too, usually 21 days before you get to fair, or before they're harvested, I should say. Now, these are some of the main swine antibiotic drugs to help prevent specifically respiratory diseases, guys, that we're going to battle, such as mycoplasma, pneumonia, influenza. Those are some of the diseases that pigs are going to battle and can get. So those drugs are Draxxin, Exceed, Lincomycin, Tylenol, Baytril, Resflor, Banamine. You may have heard of some of these. It's always important to kind of visit with your veterinarian if you think you need to give an antibiotic to, which one we need to give. They're all going to work just a little bit differently. One of the best ones, and not just because my company makes it, but Draxxin, that is one of the #1 selling antibiotic in the country for a reason, because it is a broad spectrum antibiotic that covers respiratory disease in swine, which a lot of times is what you're going to battle, if they're getting a little cough or a cold or a runny nose. And a lot of times before we ever send them on their way and go on a stressful trip, we're going to treat them with an antibiotic to help prevent disease from ever happening the first time. So, do we have any specific questions on antibiotics, what to use and why?
Yes.
Okay.
Is respiratory the most common problems that you would need antibiotics for?
Absolutely. Swine respiratory disease antibiotics are going to take care of that one. If they have a stomach problem, a digestive issue, an antibiotic's not going to get anything done there. That's a different beast of maybe getting their gut back online. And we'll talk about that when we, maybe switch feeds. Sometimes they'll get scours. Sometimes those pigs will go off feed for a little while and not feed good or feel good when you switch feeds on them. That obviously has nothing to do with their respiratory system. And that is and an antibiotic's not going to do a darn bit of good for them. In fact, it may hurt them even more because you're giving an antibiotic to that animal. So respiratory disease is our main purpose of giving antibiotics. Good question.
Hey, Ben.
Yes.
Do you have to do antibiotics?
You don't have to, but it's usually the quickest and most effective way and highest quality way of helping prevent disease or treat an animal if they are sick. There's not many other options out there. That's the challenge.
Are they vaccinations, or are they like creams or like something you put in their food?
Okay, good question. We're talking about injectable antibiotics right now, so kind of in a syringe was what we were talking about here, but they can also be feed additives as well. And we'll talk about that here momentarily about feed grade antibiotics that are in the feed. But good question. Dawn, did we have anything?
Yeah, there's one more.
Okay.
Is it a good idea to give your pig a dose of Draxxin when you bring it home just to be preventive, or can it cause harm if they're already healthy?
Yeah, that's a good question. you're not going to cause any harm if they're already healthy by giving them a shot of Draxxin. Understand this. Draxxin is a product that actually stays in the lung tissue for up to 14 days. It has a long span there of being able to fight the pathogen or fight the disease for a long period of time. So it's a good preventative. I always recommend it once I bring pigs home to give them a shot of antibiotics, such as maybe Draxxin or Exceed, because it will last in the lung tissue for quite a long time. And it's not a bad idea right there. It's not going to hurt them either. Obviously, you don't want to give them one right after the other. That's why if you give one shot of Draxxin, it'll last in the lung tissue for over a week.
Also, Ben, I have a quick question. Can you tell me which ones are vaccinations?
Well, the vaccinations are the ones we talked about a little earlier. If you go back to this slide here, those are vaccinations. These would be antibiotics, so two different things.
Oh, okay, because I thought like some of the antibiotics were vaccinations.
No problem. We haven't quite gotten to advanced biology yet, probably in your school, but you're doing good.
So Ben, there's a follow-up question on this.
Okay.
How do you know that the cough is coming from a respiratory problem versus the fact that they just are eating dirt or have been exposed to dust?
No, that's a good question. Understand this, just if it's really dusty environment too, yes, they can get a cough going there. That could cause actually or be a culprit in that disease, that environment. An antibiotic will still help with that, fight that, prevent that disease. Understand this. Antibiotics are going to take care of the secondary problems of bacteria in a respiratory disease. The actual virus itself, obviously, the antibiotic is not going to do anything against that virus. What it's going to do is help the body fight against that disease. So our prevention or keeping these pigs healthy is kind of twofold. We're going to make sure they're properly vaccinated, so if they ever come in contact with that disease, that virus, that their body already has an immune response for it, and we can give them an antibiotic to help also fight the secondary effects, the bacteria of that disease.
So Ben, is there a way that you can, if something happens, can something break a pig's relationship with you or a bond with you?
Good question there. I guess if they don't trust you anymore, maybe it could break that bond. But I think once you've established that bond, when they'll bring those pigs home and you've worked with them, they're going to stay pretty loyal to you. That's a good question.
But for vaccinations, will they unbond with you?
Oh, you mean if you have to give them a shot?
Yeah.
No, they should be fine. I mean, I give shots plenty of times to my pigs, and they still love me all the same. But I understand what you're talking about there. Maybe have your maybe that's why sometimes the vet can do it, or your mom or dad can do it. That way you don't break the bond of the pig. Good question.
And I can't hear you very well.
Oh, you can't hear me very well? How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. I've got my microphone here.
I think we're good, Ben. That's all the questions.
All right. On to deworming. We had questions about this a moment ago. So when you deworm or delouse or demange livestock or pigs, we're trying to control whipworms, roundworms, mange, lice. That's what we're really trying to control. So there's several different products that can do that. Dectomax or Ivomec, that would be an injectable dewormer that's going to take care of your roundworms, mange, lice. So that's going to take care of both internal parasites and some external parasites of mange and lice. Safeguard would take care of your whipworms and roundworms, which would just be internal parasites. So when I talk about up at the top there, rotate every 30 days, somebody asked how often should we deworm our pigs? That's controlling those internal parasites. I always say every 30 days, rotate every 30 days. So I kind of like doing it on the first of the month. So if we get our pigs now, maybe April 1st, we're going to give a dewormer with the shot of Dectomax. And then May 1, we're going to give them some Safeguard paste or some Safeguard wormer, which is in the feed. That's the only way you're going to get Safeguard into a pig, is you have to feed it to them. And then come back, and maybe June 1, we come back with a shot of Dectamax again or a shot of Ivamec. Rotating and kind of going back and forth between your Dectamax or Ivamec type of products, those Mectins, and then the Safeguard, alternating every 30 days, keeps those pigs free of parasites, mange, lice, worms, keeps them on feed better, keeps them healthier, and you're going to see better gains. So that's pretty important. There's a couple preventative things. One is deworming that will have the greatest effect on that animal's performance. You have any questions on that?
Yeah, there is some worming questions.
Okay, let's hear them.
Oh, actually, I think they got it. Hold on.
Got it answered.
Do you have to have a vet to do worming or to deworm, or is it just available over the counter?
The deworming products such as Dectamax and Ivamec and Safeguard are all available over the counter. You could just go to your local pharmacy store or feed store to get the Safeguard. That you don't need a prescription for that.
Okay, and then what about withdrawal times on the wormers?
You're going to have to read each one specifically. Off the top of my head, most of the time they're 21 days, somewhere in there. So kind of the idea is this, that, if you're 30 days from fair and you give your last, shot of dewormer, then you're in good shape for the rest of the, all the way through fair. You're good. And you're going to be able to, be within the withdrawal time.
Okay, there's a couple more.
Okay.
Worming's a hot topic, so let's a couple
That's
more
good.
questions. Maybe you got this and I missed it. I was trying to answer a question on the phone. So it said, would you prefer deworming through a shot or a paste, or did you say what your preference was? I didn't catch if you did.
Well, one of my preferences is an injectable dewormer, and here's why. I know it gets in the animal. Sometimes when you have to do it like a Safeguard in the feed, whether or not they eat that feed is a question if you have to hand add it. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. If it's a paste, that's fine. But if anybody's ever tried to give paste to a pig, sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge. So that's why I like the injectable, because it gets in the animal.
Okay, so then a follow-up question is, with that, is that, can you explain a good way to do that?
So one of the best things you can buy is a snare, and they sell them at every farm store. It's a pig snare. You can put it around their snout, and all you do is have somebody kind of pull back on it. They'll sit there, and you can give that shot right in the neck. We always want to give injectable shots, whether we're talking about antibiotics or vaccines or, a Dectamax shot in the neck, in the muscle, in a pig. Okay. And you can do it then very quickly. I know a lot of times we're thinking, man, we're going to run around the pen and chase those pigs around, and trying to give them a shot is just torturous. I know what you guys are thinking and talking about, because I've been there before. Get a snare, and you can get them caught rapidly. You just put that snare in their snout and their mouth, and you pull back, and they'll pull back and they'll scream a little bit, but you can give the shot in about 3 seconds, and then you release them and they're done. And it's far less stress than trying to chase them around or stick them in a corner.
So can you have a dish of food? Last year we had oatmeal, and if they trust you enough to walk up to them and just give it to them really fast?
You can. I mean, I've given shots without having to snare them before. It probably all depends on the pig and if they're really tame or not, but that's a good question. You can do that.
Thank you.
So Ben, is there a wormer that goes in the water?
There's the pig swig stuff, but I am not a real big fan of it. I don't think it's very effective. The wormer in the water. Sorry. Part of it again is, do they get it? Do they drink it all? Is it managed at the right rate? Unless you really have a medicator that's hooked up to your water system where it can dose it out at the right rate every time, it's pretty tough to manage that one.
Okay. Do you have to, I think you answered this, but maybe they didn't get it. It says, can you give the shots yourselves, or you have to have your vet
You can
give
do
you
it
the
yourself.
this prescription shots? Like, can you
Yeah.
buy one? I think it's two questions. One, can you give the shot? Two, can you buy the medicine yourself?
When it comes to anything that's prescribed, such as Draxin, Exceed, any type of antibiotic, those are going to be prescriptions. A lot of times your vet will just prescribe it to you, and then you can go home and give it. The vet doesn't actually have to give that shot. When it comes to, say, a Dectomax or an Ivomec injection, that's just over the counter. You can go give that yourself. Obviously, buy it over the counter. You don't need a prescription for that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I
How are we
think.
doing?
Oh wait, there's one more.
One more. All right, good.
What is the name of the deworming paste that is used for pigs?
It's probably Safeguard. It's for a lot of times it says for horses, because there's not technically a pig paste Safeguard, but there is a horse paste Safeguard, which is the same exact thing. It's just a different dosage rate.
Okay. Sorry, there's lots of questions on here. Can
right.
you put the dewormer on a nozzle and administer it?
On a nozzle. Not quite sure.
William, maybe you could unmute yourself and explain that a little bit. I don't know that I can explain that very well. Maybe you can't unmute yourself. Okay, maybe put a more explanation. I don't know quite what that one means. Okay, I think that's the last one. Maybe I'll get it. I'll have him, maybe he'll give me,
Okay.
On a water nozzle. Can you put it on like a water nozzle, like a paste, like put the paste on the water nozzle and then give it to him?
Well, you can figure out any which way you want to do it as long as it gets in the pig system. That's the big key.
Okay.
So you can hold them upside down if you'd like. Sometimes that could be a challenge, though.
Right. Okay. I think that's all that are in there right now.
Okay. Okay. Which leads us to the Veterinary Feed Directive, a VFD. Now, this came about a couple years ago, where the FDA decided they were going to regulate feed-grade antibiotics and kind of basically have a prescription just like injectable antibiotics, which I'm not saying this was all a bad idea to help kind of regulate it. And you need a veterinary, basically VFD, a veterinary feed directive, to be able to feed antibiotics in feed. Here's where it became a bit of a challenge for swine. All right. Pig feed, if you're buying a good show feed out there, almost all of them are coming with some type of antibiotic in them. Chlorotetracycline, oxytetracycline, lincomycin, Tylen. If you looked at any feed tags before the VFD, they had some type of medication in them. The reason they had them in there was to help prevent disease from ever happening. So to keep those pigs a little bit healthier respiratory-wise, they're feeding some CTC, they're feeding some Lincomix for some respiratory disease and mycoplasma control. And it did a really good job. And those pigs tended to gain a lot better. I mean, their rate of gain is traditionally, scientifically proven to be about 15% greater on a medicated feed. However, when the VFD came about, all show feeds took out these medicated feeds, and the only way you're getting, or medications, these antibiotics, and the only way you can get them in there is if you get a VFD for a special feed, or you have to hand add them. You can do that, obviously. I mean, I have VFDs for my operation because my baby pigs need to have medicated feed, especially when they're really starting out. Is it totally necessary for show pigs nowadays to have, medicated feed? Not necessarily. But here's the big thing that we found, guys, when the VFD came about. All of a sudden, I got a lot more calls And a lot of us got a lot more calls in the swine community of, my pig is not as healthy, or it did not grow like it did last year. The first year we had we had the VFD take effect, and we had no medicated feed out there. Well, there's a reason why. That medicated feed is to help prevent disease from ever happening, and to keep those pigs healthier and consequently gaining better if they're healthier. It's weird. It works really well. So that created a little more of a challenge for you guys, and consequently people had to use more injectable antibiotics. So that's where, that comes in. Understand though, you can get some medicated feed with a VFD. You have to have your veterinarian and then your feed supplier work together to get that done. I just want you to be, aware of that. It is an option out there, but it's not going to come standard in any of your feeds anymore. Do we have any questions relative to feed grade antibiotics, Dawn? Anybody chatting in on that?
Do you have to use medicated feeds?
You don't have to, no. And you're not going to unless you get a veterinary, basically VFD for it. It does help, but you don't have to use them. And you're not going to be able to use them unless you get that VFD, as I said.
So is there one that you would recommend? Would you recommend getting that VFD? If so, what brand?
Oh, of one of those drugs they mean, I'm assuming. Chlorotetracycline, CTC would be a good one, or lincomycin. I guess those would be my two first choices.
All right.
And it's cheap. It's not that it doesn't add that much expense to your feed. It really doesn't.
I think there's a follow-up. Is there certain brands of feed out there that you know of that have in there that you can buy? Like, I think they're asking, like, is it, I don't even know, Mormon, Purina, et cetera, is there brands out there that have it?
So just for instance, we feed a lot of Linder at our place, and they will make you a medicated feed if you order it, but it has to be a ton at a time. So some feed dealers out there, if you have a certain feed dealer that either has Showtech or Linder or Purina, you could ask them, hey, can I get this as a, with a medication in it? And that dealer may or may not be able to get it for you. That's going to be the challenge, but it's probably going to be a 1 ton minimum for them to get it. And they may say, well, you've got to take a whole ton of it. That's the challenge.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
Is it a lot more costly to have those feeds? Probably if they're having to do a whole ton or whatever.
Yeah, the actual cost of the drug is actually minimal. It does not add hardly any cost to the feed. It's very similar to non-medicated. Now, understand, a lot of those feeds, I can go back there, they are putting BMD in them, which is a kind of a bacitracin, which doesn't require a VFD. So there's kind of it's not a true grade antibiotic. It's more of a bacitracin, which is a little different classification to help prevent some disease problems. So they are putting something in there that doesn't require a VFD.
Can you repeat those feed brands that you just said a minute ago?
Linder, Mormons, which would be Showtech. Those would be the main ones that you could probably get medicated feed in.
Okay.
If you talk to your dealer, depending on where you're at and who the dealer is.
I think that's all. There's a question. I don't know if you want to, at this point, it's a feed question. I don't know if you want to answer it or it can be diverted. It says, what can pigs not eat?
Okay, well, that's a good question. We're going to jump into some feed program here. Pigs need to be fed a complete ration that's formulated, by a company out there or a nutritionist. They cannot be fed trash, garbage, table scraps, raw, anything raw. That is a good chance for disease to actually spread. They need to be fed a corn and soybean based diet of a complete ration that is formulated. So those show pig feed, I know those companies I mentioned, they have their show feed. It's not cheap. However, there's a reason it's not cheap, is because they are specifically formulated to maximize the genetic potential of those show pigs.
I have a quick question for you, Ben.
Sure.
Why do you use medicated feed?
To prevent disease from ever happening. So if they're fed, say, a feed with chlorotetracycline with CTC in it, that will prevent them from having respiratory problems, so you don't have to go and give a shot of Draxin or Exceed.
Drax.
A question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is it okay? So like I know if my pigs have like been super good to me that day, I'll feed them like fruit like strawberries or watermelon once in a while. Is that okay? Or is that gonna hurt?
Well, I mean, technically it's probably not what we need to be doing. It's not going to hurt them, but there's a reason actually we don't feed garbage, so to speak, to pigs, and that is it just has greater chance of foodborne illness being spread. So I know we did that all the time of, oh, here, take the watermelon, pig, and eat the watermelon rind, because I remember, I think I did that as a kid too. But it would be best just to keep them on their regular ration of whatever your feed is, because it's going to keep them more consistent, less chance of a bellyache, less chance of going off feed, less chance of digestive problems.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Ben, there's another question that goes along kind of a little bit with that. It says that they often see kids that are feeding their animals marshmallows or treats. Is that a thing?
Right. So what is the question? Is it bad, or what's the?
Is it okay?
Is it okay? Look, I know some kids will do that, or help train them. They'll feed them a marshmallow. Probably every once in a while is not going to hurt them. I don't think we need to make that the staple of their diet. So is it going to totally ruin them? No. But I know some kids, will feed them a marshmallow if they're trying to, get them to walk and behave and those things. Is it horrible? No. But as far as their main diet, I think we need to continue just with the total ration in the bag.
All right, one more question there.
Sure.
Is there a feed that you can feed that has no corn in it, so that people that are eating the pigs when they're processed that are allergic to corn?
Okay, good question. As far as animals that have been fed corn, that animal processes the corn in a way where it has no effect on the meat relative to, an allergy of corn. I know there's people out there that believe that there's, they have to be fed corn free in order to, be healthy for whatever reasons. So that is a total, scientifically proven that a pig will digest that corn and it has no effect on the product itself. Is there feed out there that doesn't have corn in it? Not that I'm aware of from a total mixed ration in a, a show pig, a bag feed that you're going to buy. Corn is the number one ingredient because it is the number one requirement as far as energy. Corn and soybeans are the two main components of, the monogastric animal's diet as far as pigs. And it's going to have no effect on the final product.
Okay, perfect. There's one more health question in terms of those antibiotics. Sorry to take you back, but
No,
I missed
fine.
it and they reposted it. So thanks for remembering. It says, what is the best medicine to treat this for staph infection?
Staph, that's a good one. Staph is either going to be Baytril or Exceed is what I would treat kind of your staph infection with.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, I think we're caught up on questions.
Okay, good. I'm glad we have them. So kind of wrapping up with the feed program there, we want a balanced nutrition program to maximize their genetic potential. A lot of different feed companies out there, as we talked about, there's Linder, there's Showtech, there's Showright, there's Purina, there's local mills that do a very nice job. The big thing is pick one and use their product line. Don't try to keep changing the pig's diet every week. That is tougher on the pig than anything else if you keep changing their diet. So consequently, when you're starting pigs out at home and you bring them home for the first time, you need to transition them from the feed that they were on to your new feed kind of slowly over a week's time. Gradually introduce them to that new feed. Don't do it all of a sudden, because that can cause upset stomach. They can get the scours. You will throw, if that pig is not eating properly, they have greater chance of then developing a disease, such as maybe a respiratory disease, because their immune system is not fighting it nearly as well. So think about it this way. The stomach and the lung tissue are the two most important things that you need to pay attention to for your show pig project. They need to keep eating healthy every day, the right amount of feed, the proper amount, not changing it too drastically, and keep them in a good environment where it's not too wet, it's not too dusty. They keep, good airflow to keep their lungs in good shape. You keep those two basically organs in check, your pig's going to grow and perform just fine. So, kind of my final thoughts here, and then we can get into some more questions. You need to enjoy this project. This is about the family and a great learning opportunity. At the beginning of your project, sit down with your family, establish some goals, work to achieve that success, and most importantly, have fun with the project. I know it can be a little daunting at times when you bring animals home and you want to keep them healthy. And if you ever have a sick one, man, it's frustrating. But remember, I think if we prevent the problems from ever happening in the first place, good environment, clean water, clean feed, good environment to be in, keep them warm during the winter, keep them cool during the summer, you're going to prevent a lot of problems from ever happening. So with that, if you have more questions, there's something I didn't answer tonight that you want, fire away.
Okay, there's another one on there.
Okay.
So if we pick a feed, use it from the time we get the pig to the time fair is, and then if we need to have them add weight, what supplements like beet pulp or something should we use?
Okay, to add weight. You can do a lot of things. Remember this, the energy of the feed, the amount of calories in that feed are going to be a straight determining factor of how much weight they're going to be putting on at the end. A product like beet pulp is actually going to be higher in fiber and not as high in energy. They're not going to be able to put on weight with beet pulp. If you feed a supplement such as ractopamine, paline, that will cause them to actually gain faster and put on weight more efficiently. That's what that drug does, which is completely legal with a 0-day withdrawal in pigs. Understand that. So if you're wanting to add more weight to those pigs, it's really the amount of feed and which kind of feed you're feeding. Think about it this way. When the animal is younger, you're going to be at a little higher percentage protein, probably at a 20 or an 18% protein feed when you're starting out. And then toward the end, you're going to be at a 18 to 16 to maybe even 14% protein. You're going to have more calories and a little less protein at the end. So that's why you kind of adjust the level, the type of feed as you're feeding throughout the process. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes. So, and the first question with that connected was that they should pick the same. It's a question mark. Should they pick the same? Stick with it the whole time from the time they get their pig to the time they go to fair.
Yeah, I really think so. Unless all of a sudden you don't think it's working, but if it's a reputable company that has a show feed program that understands how to feed these genetically superior show pigs, such as a Showtech or a Linder or Purina or Showrite, or even some local mills that have done a good job, stick with that type of feed. I don't be bouncing back between one or the other, every other week. That probably isn't going to get you a very consistent result.
Okay. We're going to skip. I'm going to do these in order because there's a lot of them, so I don't want to miss anyone. Okay. Back to hair care. How many times a day or a week or whatever should they condition their skin?
Every day. I condition those pigs' skin. We brush them. A lot of times if you don't even have to put on a lot of extra conditioner. If you just go out and take a stiff rice root brush and brush those pigs every single day with the hair, you can condition their skin and hair extremely well. Then you can put on some conditioner of some type, and it could be as easy as just a lotion. I like that Luster's pink oil lotion. You can find that at Walmart. Actually, it's really good on skin and hair. Understand this though: if you're going to condition their skin, You can't put them out in the sun afterwards because it will cause them to burn more severely. So we want to keep those pigs out of the direct sunlight if we're wanting to keep them, from sunburning.
Okay, perfect. The next one has to do with exercise. How often should they exercise? It says how many times do you have to walk them a day or a week?
Good question. So when I bring my baby pigs home, if I'm, working with them, I start trying to work with them every day. And what I mean by that is it's short amounts of time every day. If it's just when you first bring them home, all we're trying to do is have them get used to you, right? You just need to sit in the pen, have them get used to you, spend 5 minutes with them. And then you start building up to, all right, we're going to maybe walk them outside and get them trained with a whip. It's never too early to start with that. But here's the key. You're not going to try to walk them an hour the very first day because they're going to get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated and it's going to turn out really bad. It's kind of like running a marathon. You just don't go run the marathon the first day. You train for the marathon and you work up to it. As you go throughout the summer, those training periods or walking them gets longer. Maybe it's 5 minutes, then it's 10 minutes, then it's 15 minutes, then it's 20 minutes of hard driving. But they have to learn how to respond to the whip first and you first, and that's where it starts at the very beginning. So it's never too early to start, but it's short increments every time.
Okay, perfect. The next one takes back to a health question. It says, when you talk about ear infections in pigs, they had one last year and they just need to know more about what to do for them.
An ear infection. Ooh, that could be a multitude of things that can cause an ear infection. A lot of times, if they're holding their ear funny, maybe that's what you're talking about, and they're kind of tilting their head, they could have water in that ear, or they could have a wood chip in their ear. Sometimes that'll happen. If it's actually a serious ear infection, obviously we need to give some type of antibiotic. A lot of times, even just a penicillin would work well on that type of infection, or maybe even an Exceed works well on an ear infection. So it could be two different things there, Dawn, is what they're talking about.
Okay. Can you repeat what the name for that medicine was for the staph again?
Baytril or Exceed were the two drugs to fight a staph infection.
Okay. Okay, so there is a question about feed again. Is paling a feed, like a feed additive, or it's a shot?
It's a feed additive. It is added to the feed. There are some feeds that come with it already included, and it's already formulated in there. Or a lot of times it's just a feed additive that you're going to hand at it, say, a scoop of it, or a 1/4 pound per head per day to get you a certain rate. And it says it on the instructions usually when you buy that paling.
Okay. Next question is a feed question. Is it okay to feed him just old milk to add weight?
Obviously milk can be high in fat. It's not a bad thing. Obviously, we don't want to detract too far away from the general diet that they're on. Those things, I think, tend to be kind of quick fixes if we're trying to add weight real rapidly. That's why weighing your pig frequently throughout the project and charting their rate of gain. I had some of those slides. I took them off there since we weren't going to talk specifically about feed tonight. But since you have those questions, understand this, ladies and gentlemen. A pig is probably going to average from the time you get them to fair about a 1.7 pounds per day. That's going to be their average daily gain over that lifetime. So if you want to chart out a pig's growth curve, you get them, say, April 15th, and they're 70 pounds, and your fair is August 1, and you want them 260 pounds, they're going to need to gain about 1.7 pounds per day. Now, understand, when they're a little baby pig, they're only going to gain about 1.3 to 1.5. And then when they're getting older and bigger, they could gain over 2 to maybe 3 pounds a day once they're consuming a lot of feed. But the average from that time is 1.7. So kind of going back to the, trying to add products to add weight, stay on top of it early, weigh those pigs frequently, bi-weekly as you're going throughout your project, and you could chart that growth curve and hopefully prevent issues of having to put a lot of weight on them at the end.
Okay, I'm just going to add to that because there's a couple more kind of directly connected to that.
Sure.
So I think you answered this one. It was about giving pigs some marshmallow paste to gain weight. I'm gathering that that would not be a suggestion.
Not going to do a lot, no.
Okay, and then the next question is, if they do have to add weight and they're following the chart and they're realizing they're not going to be there, is there a supplement that you suggest to add to their pig's diet to gain more weight?
Well, ractopamine or Paline would be the one product you can add to increase their rate of gain. That one is scientifically proven. That's what it was developed for. You can get them to gain more weight and consume more feed when they're on Paline. Other than that, feeding multiple times a day, maybe going to 3 feedings, trying to wet the feed, changing texture a little bit, start slopping them and making it wet. That can tend to help them consume more. Those are a couple ideas. Making sure you're up to date on your worming protocol, make sure they're wormed. That will keep them, make sure they're gaining as much weight as possible for their genetic makeup.
So you just touched on something somebody asked, and I think that you just said it, is that says, do you prefer continuous feed versus ration feeding, meaning like a self feeder versus a feed multiple hand feeding, multiple times a day?
I kind of touched on this at the beginning. I don't mind a self feeder at the very beginning of the project. Maybe, when they're young and they're all together in a group and you're just trying to get them, on the same ration, eating all the same, kind of used to each other. Once those pigs are over 100 pounds, 125 pounds, they need to start to be fed separately. And here's why. So you know exactly what each pig is consuming and eating per day. If you're feeding 4 pounds to a pig, make sure that they're eating those 4 pounds and not their roommate or their pen mate is eating 5 and they're only eating 3. And then you wonder, how come, little Porky isn't getting as big as big Porky over here? I think that's extremely important. Measuring out that feed, weighing out that feed. It's not just a coffee can, remember. Weigh the feed to know exactly how many pounds you're feeding. Because feed efficiency is the number of pounds it takes to get a feed to get 1 pound of gain. Pigs, they're genetically pretty good nowadays. They're 2.5 to 3 pounds of feed to 1 pound of gain. So if you want them to be gaining 2 pounds a day, they're going to have to be consuming around 6 pounds of feed a day, if that makes sense. And a lot of them will do even better. They'll gain 2 pounds on 5 pounds of feed. Some of these genetics are really that good. But unless you know exactly how much you're feeding, you don't know.
So I think you just answered the other 2 questions on here that were connected. One was if your pig was too heavy, what to do. But it sounds like if you are weighing feed and monitoring in advance, you could probably slow that feed consumption down early on and not end up at the end having them too big.
Yeah, and I know we all get to that point of, man, we're going to have to hold this pig for a while. I'm a big fan. If we have to hold one, let's hold them from kind of that 150 to 200 pound range before they get monstrous. If we're kind of charting that growth throughout to get to fair, that way, once they're over 200 pounds, they can kind of go back on, they're getting as much as they want to eat, so to speak, and we're not having to hold them at the very end. But if you have to hold, products such as a high fiber diet of some oats or some beet pulp can give them, enough consumption of total pounds, but they're not going to gain nearly as much weight on it. But hopefully we can try to hold them earlier in that growth curve than later.
All right, perfect. The other question is connected that I think you hit it on when you said there was a 2.5 to 3 pound to 1 pound. The question was for everybody is that if you had a 50-pound pig, how much feed would you need to get it to fair? But maybe you could do that based on your fair, because we have lots of people on here that are we have people from Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, so we have fairs like a whole different time frame gamut. But
yeah, think about it this way. It's going to take about 12 bags of feed, 600 pounds probably, to feed each pig for the summer, give or take. And that's of a good show feed they can be efficient on. So that's a rough estimate.
Perfect.
But most people are going to get their pigs at 50, 60, 70 pounds, and they're going to need to be put on 200 pounds of weight, right? in that time frame. Well, at a 3-to-1 ratio, that's 600 pounds of feed, 12 bags.
Perfect. Okay. I don't see any other questions in there. If I missed a question, I was trying to catch them as you guys were putting them in pretty quickly. If I missed something, I'm just going to open it here. You can unmute yourself. Does anybody else have a question for Ben?